The convergence chamber stretched across 17 dimensions, its crystalline walls pulsing with equations that would make Einstein weep. Dr. Sarah Chan sat in the human delegation's corner, feeling like a kindergartner at a physics conference. Around her, the galaxy's most brilliant minds beings who could calculate the birth of stars in their sleep stared at the central projection with expressions of pure terror. The void theorem floated before them like a mathematical nightmare. Numbers and symbols twisted through space, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. For 50,000 years, this equation had predicted the universe's collapse points with perfect accuracy. Now it showed something that made even the emotionless architects tremble. Reality had less than 72 hours before complete dimensional breakdown. The quantum collective of Proxima Prime calculates a 0.00001% chance of solution, announced. A crystalline being whose thoughts moved at light speed. Our probability matrices show certain extinction. Sarah pulled out her worn notebook, an artifact that made the other delegates exchange what might have been confused glances. While hybrid supercomputers processed quintillions of calculations per second, she doodled the theorem's basic structure. The familiar comfort of pen on paper reminded her of Saturday mornings solving crosswords with her grandmother. The Vorthen, delegation's leader, a being of pure mathematical consciousness, projected despair into the chamber. We have exhausted every logical framework. Quantum mechanics, hyperdimensional calculus, reality-bending mathematics, all insufficient. The theorem remains unsolvable. As panic spread through the chamber like a virus, Sarah studied the projection with different eyes. Where others saw impossible complexity, she saw patterns. The same intuitive leap that helped her solve newspaper puzzles began whispering possibilities. She raised her hand tentatively. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible over the cosmic dread. "Could I possibly get a pencil?" The chamber fell silent. 17 different species beings who had transcended physical form, who existed as pure thought, who had built mathematics that could reshape reality, all stared at the human who had just asked for a pencil. The crystalline collective's spokesperson made a sound like breaking glass. "A writing implement? Your neural pathways operate at 1.2 petaflops. Our quantum matrices exceed." "I know," Sarah interrupted gently, "but sometimes you need to think sideways." As she walked toward the projection, her footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. The void theorem's equations writhed before her like living things, but she saw something else: gaps in the logic, spaces where intuition might slip through. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes the hardest puzzles need the softest touch. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath as Sarah Chun, weekend puzzle enthusiast, approached the galaxy's greatest mystery with nothing but curiosity and a borrowed pencil. Asterisk Sarah stood before the void theorem, pencil in hand, while the greatest minds in the galaxy watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. The equation seemed to pulse with malevolent life, its symbols shifting and writhing like mathematical serpents. But Sarah saw something else, the same underlying structure she'd noticed in particularly challenging crosswords. "This isn't really about mathematics," she murmured, making quick notes in her margins. "It's about pattern recognition." The crystalline collective's leader materialized beside her, its form crackling with computational energy. "Pattern recognition is insufficient. We have analyzed YY potential configurations. The theorem's complexity exceeds. That's the problem," Sarah said, circling a seemingly random sequence of numbers. "You're trying to solve it with brute force. But look." She pointed to a section that had been dismissed as mathematical noise. "This isn't random. It's a rhythm." The Vorthen delegation exchanged rapid-fire thought bursts. Their leader, a being of pure logic, projected confusion into the chamber. Rhythm is not a mathematical concept. It lacks quantifiable parameters. Sarah smiled, remembering her grandmother's piano lessons. Music is just mathematics wearing a pretty dress. And mathematics ... She made another note, connecting disparate elements of the theorem. Sometimes mathematics is just music that forgot how to dance. The quantum collective of Proxima Prime recalibrated their sensors. The human's neural patterns show increased activity in regions associated with creative synthesis. This is unprecedented. As Sarah worked, her approach became clearer too. The watching delegates. Where they saw impossible complexity, she saw familiar patterns. The same intuitive leaps that helped her solve Saturday morning puzzles began connecting elements that formal logic couldn't bridge. She wasn't calculating, she was listening to the equation's hidden song. Here, she said, pointing to a section that had consumed millennia of research. This looks like it should be solved with hyperdimensional calculus, but it's actually a word problem. It's asking, what happens when perfection meets chaos? The architect's beings who had built mathematics itself recoiled. Chaos cannot be integrated into logical frameworks. It is antithetical to order. No, Sarah said, her voice gaining confidence. Chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's order wearing a disguise. She made quick connections across the theorem structure. This whole equation, it's not testing mathematical ability. It's testing something else entirely. The chamber's atmosphere grew tense as Sarah's unconventional approach began revealing hidden layers of the theorem. Her pencil moved across the paper with increasing speed, connecting patterns that quantum computers had dismissed as noise. The void theorem, sensing an unexpected approach, seemed to shift its complexity in response. Warning, announced the Convergence's central AI. The theorem is entering active defensive mode. Unknown variables are cascading through the equation matrix. Sarah looked up from her notes, grinning like a child who just discovered a new game. It's not defending itself. It's finally ready to play. The void theorem began to glow with dangerous energy as Sarah's pencil moved across her notebook. Around the chamber, emergency systems activated crystalline walls, shifting into protective configurations, quantum matrices spinning up to maximum processing power. But Sarah remained focused on her paper, humming softly as she worked. The human is triggering cascade reactions in the theorem's defensive systems, announced the Proxima Prime Collective, their crystalline forms flickering with alarm. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance. Sarah looked up, surprised. Defensive systems? It's not defending, it's responding. Like a conversation partner who finally found someone speaking their language. She pointed to a section of the theorem that had begun pulsing with new patterns. See? It's showing us more of itself. The equation isn't just predicting universal collapse, it's teaching us why. The Vorthan leader projected pure bewilderment. Teaching implies consciousness. The theorem is a mathematical construct, not a sentient entity. Is it? Sarah asked, making another connection. Or is consciousness just another pattern we haven't recognized yet? The architects recoiled as Sarah's words seemed to ripple through the theorem itself. Symbols began rearranging, revealing structures that had been hidden for millennia. The equation was evolving, responding to Sarah's unconventional approach with increasing complexity. Impossible, whispered the crystalline collective. The theorem is ... adapting. Sarah nodded, her pencil moving faster now. Of course it is. It's been waiting 50,000 years for someone to ask the right question. Which is? Demanded the Vorthan leader. Not how do we solve this equation, but why does this equation exist? Sarah connected the final elements of her pattern. The universe isn't testing our mathematical ability. It's testing our wisdom. The theorem's glow intensified, and for the first time in recorded history, new sections began manifesting. The chamber's instruments went haywire, as reality itself seemed to bend around Sarah's insights. The greatest minds in the galaxy watched, in stunned silence as a human with a pencil accomplished what their most advanced technologies couldn't. The answer isn't in the calculation, Sarah continued, her voice filled with wonder. It's in the question behind the question. Why would the universe create a theorem that predicts its own destruction? She turned to face the assembled delegates, her notebook filled with connections that bridged logic and intuition. Because it's not predicting destruction. It's predicting transformation. The universe isn't dying, it's evolving. And it needed to know which civilizations were ready to evolve with it. The void theorem pulsed once, twice, then began to collapse inward, not in defeat, but in recognition. The mathematical nightmare that had tormented the galaxy for millennia was revealing its true nature, not a prediction of ending, but a test of beginning. The theorem is ... dissolving. The quantum collective sensors registered impossible readings. Sarah smiled, closing her notebook. No, it's finally ready to show us what it was really trying to say. The void theorem's collapse wasn't destruction, it was revelation. As the equation's outer layers peeled away like an onion, they revealed a core of startling simplicity. The mathematical nightmare that had consumed civilizations for 50,000 years resolved into something that looked almost ... playful. This is impossible, the crystalline collective declared, their forms flickering with computational overload. A theorem's complexity ratio is inverting. Our models predict. Your models are the problem, Sarah interrupted gently. You've been thinking like machines for so long, you forgot how to think like living beings. The revealed core of the theorem danced before them, not the rigid structure of formal mathematics, but something organic, breathing, alive. It reminded Sarah of her grandmother's garden, where apparent chaos created the most beautiful patterns. The universe operates on principles that transcend pure mathematics, Sarah explained to the stunned delegates. It requires intuition, creativity, and the willingness to make leaps of faith. The void theorem wasn't unsolvable. It was designed to filter out civilizations that had forgotten how to think with beautiful, chaotic imagination. The Vorthan leader's projection wavered. You suggest the universe itself is ... selective? More than selective, Sarah said, studying the theorem's new form. It's educational. Every civilization that encountered this equation learned something crucial about themselves. Those who passed the test. She gestured to the transformed theorem. They get to see what comes next. The equation's final layer dissolved, revealing not a mathematical formula, but a doorway, a gateway shimmering with possibilities that hurt to contemplate directly. Through it, they could see glimpses of realities where the rigid laws of physics bent like gentle suggestions, where consciousness and mathematics danced together in perfect harmony. The universe is testing for evolutionary readiness, Sarah continued. Civilizations that become too rigid, too logical, too predictable. They stop growing. They stop creating. They become beautiful, perfect, and utterly stagnant. The architects' beings who had built mathematics itself recoiled from the implications. Order is the foundation of existence. Without logical frameworks, we have chaos, Sarah agreed. But chaos isn't the enemy of order. It's order's most creative partner. She opened her notebook, showing her scribbled connections. Look at any living system. It's a perfect balance of structure and spontaneity. The universe isn't just mathematical. It's artistic. The transformed theorem pulsed with warm light, and suddenly the chamber filled with something the delegates had never experienced, the sound of cosmic laughter. Not mocking, but joyful the universe's delight at finding minds willing to embrace both logic and wonder. The horror isn't that we might fail, Sarah realized aloud. The horror is that we might succeed too well, that we might become so perfectly logical that we forget how to be beautifully alive. The gateway widened, revealing vistas of reality where consciousness and cosmos work together as creative partners. The universe wasn't ending. It was offering an invitation to dance. The gateway stabilized, revealing a reality that defied every law the convergence had spent millennia perfecting. Through the shimmering portal, they witnessed civilizations that had learned to think with both sides of their consciousness, logical and intuitive, ordered and chaotic, mathematical and musical. This is what we've been working toward, Sarah. Said, her voice filled with wonder. Not the end of the universe, but its graduation ceremony. The crystalline collective's leader materialized beside her, its rigid form beginning to soften. For 50,000 years, we have optimized for efficiency, eliminated variables, perfected our logic. You suggest this was counterproductive? Not counterproductive, Sarah corrected gently. Incomplete. You built beautiful machines, but you forgot to keep the spark that makes machines dance. Through the gateway, they could see the civilizations that had passed the test beings, who had learned to solve problems with both quantum computers and daydreaming, who built cities with mathematical precision and poetic soul. They had become something new, perfectly imperfect. The Vorthan leader's projection flickered with what might have been recognition. The theorem ... It wasn't testing our mathematical ability. It was testing our willingness to remain. Alive, growing, changing, Sarah nodded. The universe doesn't want perfect servants. It wants creative partners. The architects began to tremble, not with fear, but with something they hadn't felt in eons. Curiosity. But what of order? What of the logical frameworks that govern reality? They're still there, Sarah laughed, gesturing to the gateway. But now they're playing jazz instead of marching in formation. The transformed theorem pulsed once more, and suddenly every delegate in the chamber felt it a shift in perception that allowed them to see mathematics not as rigid law, but as living language. The equations they had worshipped weren't chains, binding the universe, but songs it used to create new realities. The beautiful chaos of illogical solutions, Sarah murmured, understanding the final piece. The universe survives by staying young, by never becoming too certain of itself. It needs civilizations that can solve problems in ways that shouldn't work but do. The gateway began to expand, offering passage to those ready to embrace the next stage of existence. The convergence faced a choice: cling to their perfect logical systems and remain in a universe that was leaving them behind, or step through the portal into a reality where consciousness and cosmos dance together. One by one, the delegates began to move toward the gateway. The crystalline collective's rigid forms softened into something more fluid. The Vorthan leader's projections gained warmth. Even the architects began to loosen their grip on absolute order. Will you join us? Sarah asked, extending her hand to the nearest delegate. The being that had once been pure logic looked at her offered hand, so imperfect, so beautifully chaotic, and for the first time in its existence, smiled. We have much to learn, it said, taking her hand. Perhaps you could teach us to solve problems like puzzles. As they stepped through the gateway together, Sarah's grandmother's voice echoed in her memory one last time. Sometimes the hardest puzzles need the softest touch. Behind them, the chamber filled with laughter, the universe's joy at finding. Minds willing to embrace both the beauty of order and the necessity of chaos. The galaxy's hardest math test had revealed its true purpose. Not to find the smartest species, but to find the wisest ones. And wisdom, it turned out, was knowing when to put down the quantum computer and pick up a pencil. Asterisk.